The 2021 quarterback class was supposed to be something special. The first 3 picks at the draft were quarterbacks, and there were 5 taken in the first round alone. Unfortunately, the reality has been that the 2021 quarterback class hasn't been great, and for most of them, there are no positives in sight. The 2021 quarterback class was very hyped up, mainly because of the number 1 guy, Trevor Lawrence. Analysts expected Lawrence to go first overall back after his freshman year at Clemson, where he won a national championship. He was great in his 3 years in college, and he ended up getting put into an absolute mess in the pros in Jacksonville under Urban Meyer. Meyer got fired during his first year as the Jags head coach because it was just nothing but messy distractions in Jacksonville. During the year, Lawrence threw for 3,600 yards and 12 touchdowns to a league-leading 17 interceptions. He didn't have a good team around him, and clearly coaching was an issue too. He has been much improved so far this year though, with 2,300 yards and 13 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. I think Trevor Lawrence does still show so much raw talent, but he's been honestly sabotaged so far in his career. I think he'll turn it around because I do think he's that good, but the question is, how bad the Jaguars can ruin him or not. Trevor Lawrence has lost a lot of games in his career already. Luckily for the guy taken right after him, Zach Wilson is starting to rack in some dubs with the Jets. Wilson showed a lot of promise at BYU, including a junior season where he threw for 33 touchdowns to just 3 picks. He started from the jump in New York. He did miss 4 games with a knee injury, but he was always the unquestioned starter. Wilson threw for 2,300 yards and only 9 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. He suffered a meniscus tear ahead of this season, so he didn't play until week 4, but is 5-1 since. I will say, the Jets are essentially winning in spite of him though. Wilson has 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. If you've actually watched the Jets play, you know it's their defense that's winning them games. Just watching Zach Wilson, it looks very clear that he is not the guy, but the Jets are going to at least wait and see if he can develop. The San Francisco 49ers took Trey Lance 3rd. He only started 1 year because of COVID at North Dakota State, but he was really good during the span. 2,700 yards and 28 touchdowns without a single interception. He walked into a San Francisco team that did already have its quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo went down in week 4, and Lance played out the rest of the game and started in week 5. He had 350 yards and 2 touchdowns to a single pick over the span. Unfortunately, he suffered a knee sprain in the loss. The only other game he started was in week 17 after a different Garoppolo injury. Lance went for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns to an interception. Lance apparently was dealing with a finger injury all season too. He was named a starter for 2022 over Garoppolo, but that didn't last long after he suffered a season-ending ankle injury in week 2. He had just 194 yards, didn't throw a touchdown, and had a pick prior. Lance has had a tough start to his young career to say the least, and it hasn't even been his doing. I have no idea how the rest of his career goes, so I won't even take a guess, but I do hope to see him back at 100% next season. After the first 3 picks were all quarterbacks, there wasn't another one selected until 11 to the Bears, Justin Fields. Fields was amazing at Ohio State for 2 years after transferring from Georgia. Once he got to the pros, Fields started 10 games as a rookie. Andy Dalton suffered a knee injury in week 2 that thrusted Fields into the starting role, but he missed a good amount of time too. Fields suffered cracked ribs and then an ankle injury, and later he got COVID. He threw for 1,870 yards and 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Plus, he rushed for 420 yards and 2 scores. Fields has already been much improved through 10 games this season. 1,400 passing yards with 12 touchdowns to 7 interceptions and 750 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. Fields looked rough year 1 and even early this season, but he's turned it up recently and at the very least is developing, something you can't say too much from this class. Justin Fields was horrible as a rookie and is now developing. Mac Jones is doing the much more exciting thing, fastly regressing after a solid rookie year. Mac was coming off of a fantastic senior season at Alabama. leading the country in passing yards and tossing 41 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. He was named the Patriots' Week 1 starter as a rookie and went on to play in every game and actually have a pretty solid year with 3,800 yards and 22 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. He was decent, but this season has been very rough for Mac. In his 3 games played, Mac has thrown for 1,100 yards and only 4 touchdowns to 7 picks. His career arc has been pretty disappointing. He wasn't ever super talented, but he was good at making good decisions and doing what was asked of him, but that hasn't really been the case lately. 2 of the quarterbacks from the draft have not started in a single game, and one of them has never actually played in a regular season game. Kyle Trask. The Buccaneers selected him with the final pick in the 2nd round after he had a really good 2-year stretch at Florida. He is currently on the Bucs roster, but is the 3rd string behind Tom Brady and Blaine Gabbert, and there really hasn't been much talk about Trask. But I think at this point, it's pretty clear that he won't ever be more than a backup. 2 picks after Trask, the Vikings took Kellen Mond. He was a 4-year starter at Texas A&M and had over 9,000 passing yards and over 1,500 rushing yards in his college career. He's one of 3 SEC quarterbacks to do so, joining Tim Tebow and Dak Prescott. Mond's only NFL appearance came in Week 17 last season. Kirk Cousins was out with COVID, so Sean Mannion started but was benched for Mond, who ended up throwing 3 passes. He was released ahead of the 2022 season, which is pretty impressive. I know the Vikings GM and head coach now didn't draft him, but to get released as a 2nd-year, 3rd-round quarterback is pretty wild to me. The Browns did claim him off of waivers, and Mond is currently the 3rd string in Cleveland behind Jacoby Brissett and Joshua Dobbs. But once Deshaun Watson's suspension is up, Mond might get the boot or end up on the practice squad or something. I think it's very possible his career is close to ending in the NFL already. With literally the next pick, the Texans selected Davis Mills, who is actually tied for the 3rd most games started in the class. Mills was a 2-year starter at Stanford before he walked into the disaster that is known as Houston. Deshaun Watson was inactive, and Mills was the backup for Tyrod Taylor, who ended up getting injured in Week 2. Tyrod did later return and played poorly, which led to Mills being the permanent starter. Mills threw for 2,600 yards and 16 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. With Watson getting traded and Tyrod leaving in free agency, Davis Mills was named the Week 1 starter for 2022. Through 9 games, Mills has almost 2,000 yards and 11 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. I don't see Davis Mills being a starter long-term in the NFL, but at the very least, he's proven well better than his draft position and is a very solid quarterback, and at the bare minimum, will be a great backup quarterback for years to come. 8 of the 10 quarterbacks taken at the draft were within the first 2 days. The 2 that weren't, Ian Book and Sam Ehlinger. The Saints selected Ian Book in the 4th round after he was a pretty successful 4-year starter at Notre Dame. He only started 1 game for the Saints, and it came last season after Jameis Winston was hurt and both Taysom Hill and Trevor Siemian were placed on the COVID list. He threw 2 picks in the game, and the Saints lost 20-3. Book was waived ahead of 2022, but was claimed off of waivers by the Eagles and is currently the 3rd stringer behind Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew. I also don't think Book will be in the league for too much longer. The last quarterback taken was Sam Ehlinger in the 6th round to the Colts. He was a 4-year starter at Texas for the most part. Ehlinger started his rookie year on injured reserve after an ACL sprain, but he was activated later in the season and saw the field a few times, but he never threw a pass. This season, Ehlinger was named the starter over Matt Ryan after early struggles. He ended up starting in 2 games, threw for just over 300 yards and a pick without actually scoring a touchdown. Once Frank Reich was fired and Jeff Saturday took over interim duties, Matt Ryan was renamed the starter and Ehlinger is the backup once again. Ehlinger is at best a backup quarterback. He's been disappointing in the NFL, just like pretty much every quarterback selected at the 2021 draft, but it is still early.